before in this country. To be quite frank, I think O.J. may be the only African American man in the 20th century charged and tried for killing two white people, who was acquitted of all charges. And we could argue all day long about whether he was guilty or innocent. Full disclosure, Bob Lazier and I are personal friends, and everything he has said to me has always been that O.J. said he was innocent and that he had no proof to prove otherwise. And so my personal opinion is explained in the book, and I'm not going to give away the book online, but I will say that my main focus is the fact that when O.J. had access to 10 or 20 million dollars, he was able to get an acquittal on 2 counts of first-degree murder when his finances were basically depleted. And I know people would argue about, well, he gets 25 grand per month retirement, which is good money. It is, but not when you're talking about hiring a top-notch legal defense team. That pales in comparison to the 20 million or so he had in 95. He ended up mortgaging his house, etc. And so when O.J. did not have a lot of money, he went to prison on what some would consider basically minor crimes, juxtaposed against 2 first-degree murder trials. And I talk about Ethan Couch in the book, a young man who at 16 years of age got drunk, got in his father's truck, and killed 4 people, left the scene of an accident, and received 10 years probation. His attorneys argued affluenza. They said that he was too rich to know right from wrong. The rich get richer, the poor get prison. I could argue all day long with case after case after case in which men who were more than likely guilty walked out of courtrooms free men, some with probation, some with acquittals, some with other deals that Dr. Jeffrey Abrams, I talk about him in the book, in San Diego, California, molested a 9-year-old kid who was mentally disabled, and the prosecutor gave him 1 year's house arrest. And there's a lot of things that go into why these kinds of cases get what they get. Sometimes the judge is bribed. Sometimes the DA is bribed. Sometimes there are campaign contributions which are made. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Sometimes it's about the bias of the jury. And so the system, in my view, is not nearly as racist as it used to be, but it is still entirely classist. When you walk into the court as a poor American, as a working class American, or even as a middle class American, the chances of you getting justice are low. The criminal justice system in America is criminal, and it lacks a lot of justice. And then we talk about in the book the California prison system, which itself should be condemned. We always talk about Bloods and Crips and Nuestra Familia, a lot of the gangs that I studied in prison. And I talk about all of them in my book, KKK, Kids Killing Kids. But the biggest gang in the state of California is the Green Wall, or 723. 7 stands for the letter G, 23 for the W. The Green Wall, the California Prison Guards gang, is the biggest gang in the state of California. And they are killers. They set inmates up to be raped routinely. This is not embellishment. They set inmates up to be raped. If they don't like an inmate, or if they found out, for example, I talk about it in the book, there was a white gentleman by the name of Michael Gorman who unfortunately was convicted of child molestation. The guards hated him, so they put him in the cell with a guy by the nickname of, excuse the expression, but Booty Bandit. And it would be funny if it were not so sad. This guy raped Michael Gorman and murdered him, shoved the TV guide up his anus, and they found him dead the next morning. What is so striking is the fact that all during the day and that includes me, heard Michael Gorman kicking on the door, begging to be moved to another cell. And the Green Wall, the guards gang, refused to move him because they put him in there to be raped. This kind of thing happens every day of the week in the California prison system. And my argument, as I said, I was talking to a young white female professor a couple of weeks ago, and she told me to give her one reason why she should be concerned about anything going on in a prison. And I explained to her that I could give her 800,000 reasons why she should be concerned about everything going on in the prisons. And those 800,000 people are released from prisons every year. And if those persons have been made into monsters, have been transformed into little demons, if you will, then they're going to wreak havoc on the neighborhood. And they will be riding the trains with you. They will be riding the highways with you. They will be working your jobs, eating in your restaurants, shopping in your malls, or robbing your malls. And so we have to all become concerned about what is going on in the prison system, because 90% of the people in prison today will be out tomorrow. They all get out. They get out. And, that's pro or con, however you want to look at it. We spent $81 billion in this country on corrections last year, on a justice system that is a complete failure. One of the things that used to bother me the most is when I would see a young 18 or 19-year-old kid come into the prison system with, let's say, a 5-year sentence for whatever the crime was. And many times, the only way he left that prison cell was in a body bag with a tag on his toe. All right, now, good to see you. This is a walking podcast, so, it's live. The only way he would leave that prison system was with a body bag, in a body bag with a tag on his toe. And sometimes he would end up getting 20 more years in prison because the gangs would force them to do things. So there's an entire subculture in the prison system that Americans don't know about that could be changed and should be changed, but hasn't been changed because nobody talks about it. And by and large, when guys get out of the prison system, they either are afraid to talk about it or don't have the ability to articulate what it is they've seen and what it is they know about. And usually you're so sick of the prison system that it's the last thing you want to talk about. You don't want to tell war stories from the prison system, and you don't want to revisit what went on there. But I will tell you, if you are a white inmate, let me just give you a couple of examples. White inmates are not allowed to take psych meds by their cohorts, by their comrades, if you will. That is shocking. So if there's a white inmate with a mental disability and a doctor prescribes him some kind of psychotropic drug, if he takes that medication, he gets stabbed by white inmates. Period. I know most people didn't know that. I could go on and on. Of course, whites can't deal with the blacks can't deal with whites, and there's just so many things. If there's a child molester on the yard or someone that they suspect of being a child molester, then the new guy who comes in, who's young, with only a 5-year sentence, is sent out to stab that guy. And so if things go wrong and he gets stabbed, then he's dead. If things go right and he gets away with the stabbing, then they'll require him to do something else, and eventually he will get caught for what he did. He will go to the hold, he will lose his privileges, and he will also be sentenced to serve more, hallelujah, time in prison. And that is a problem with the system. And so what we have is a system that is busting open at its seams. And this goes on over and over and over and over again. And the American public does not know about it. The blacks have their issues, which are very, very similar to what the whites go through, and the Mexicans, etc. So the problem is when you enter into a prison system that is supposed to reform you, that is supposed to rehabilitate you, and instead it aggravates and exacerbates what is already wrong with you. What happens is you go to prison and you get sicker, meaner, tougher, and slicker. And when you get out of prison, you return quicker. So it becomes a revolving door. And the problem is Americans are paying for this. Your tax dollars. It costs in some instances $45,000 per year to send a man to Yale. It costs in some instances $100,000 per year to send a man to jail. And if your son graduates from high school tomorrow and asks the state for a full scholarship to college, they don't have the money, they say. If your son graduates to crime and commits a crime tomorrow, they will invent the money. They will print money to lock his behind up. So when we have a country that focuses on incarceration instead of on education, we're going to always have a problem with that. But I want to talk about real life solutions, some steps that can be taken immediately to transform the American judicial system and the criminal justice system and the youth and at-risk teens of America. One of the major problems I have is a study that I read recently in which penologists and criminologists are looking at third grade test scores, and they use those scores to determine how many prisons they have to build 20 years from now. Now, if you heard that and didn't get a tingle in your spine, there's something wrong with you. You're numb. Let me repeat that. Penologists and criminologists are now looking at third grade test scores and using those scores to determine how many prisons we need to build 20 years from now. So rather than pouring money and investing time, manpower, skill power, and willpower into raising those test scores and into saving those kids at 8 years of age, instead they're preparing to incarcerate them 20 years from now. That is sick, that is sad, that is numbing. I can tell you that nationally the statistics are that 72% of the inmates in the prison system across the country cannot read above the 8th grade level. I would argue to you that that is a very conservative figure. I interviewed 1,000 inmates at least while I was in prison. I was there with Eric and Lyle Menendez. I served 7 years with Eric Menendez. I served 2 years with his brother Lyle Menendez. I just left Charles Manson a couple of months ago. And of course, I interviewed all of these guys because I was a book writer. And I wanted to monopolize on the fact that I was there with these psychopaths and use this information to go across the country and talk to people about what I learned and what I saw. And I will tell you that these psychopaths remind me of Donald, the guy running for president, quite frankly. Complete, utter narcissist. Eric Menendez walked around the prison as if he had done the nation a favor by murdering his own mom. That's a conversation for a different time. My point is, I'm going to say 8 out of 10 people in prison basically cannot read, are functionally illiterate. And this is sick, this is sad. So the flip side of that says that education is an inoculation against incarceration. So mamas and daddies, if you want to know what you can do now to make sure your son or daughter does not end up in prison, keep them in school. Do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Drag them to school. Carry them on your back. Carry them by horse carriage. Whatever you need to do, get them to get that high school diploma, because there is a 90% chance that if they get that high school diploma, there's a 90% chance they will never see the inside of a prison cell. Listen, this was a walking, quick podcast. I just wanted to put it on the air. Gonna let people know what we're talking about and what we're thinking. I am Sherman D. Manning. I'm the author of The Truth About O.J. Simpson, Race, Class, Money, and Justice. I urge and encourage you to get that book, and I think that it will make a difference in your life. I humbly ask you to take a look at it and tell me what you think about it. Sherman D. Manning. Check me out on Facebook. Get the book. Drop me a line via email. Let me know what you think. Sherman D. Manning, wishing you a great day. Keep the faith and keep hope alive. God bless you. If you see Donald, the guy running for president, tell him I said hello. You know we support nonviolence. I'm just joking there. We support total nonviolence. But have a good day. You can make a difference.